Oh, that's right, I'm filming. Okay, the discussion. So, the very first part you need to do of the discussion is actually restate your hypothesis and say whether or not it was supported. Okay, supported or rejected, they're the two terms that I want you to use. Okay, now, you don't just simply say that and then move on. You say that and then you give evidence using your actual data that you've collected. So you talk about your means, if that's what you're referred to in your results section. Really important, that second part of that. Sometimes kids tend to gloss over that. They simply think it's okay just to state whether or not the hypothesis was supported. You need to provide evidence. When you've done that, you need to link it then into, well, is what you found in your experiment, is that the same as what other people have found? So in your introduction, as I mentioned in the previous clip, in your introduction you should talk about past research. Okay? Here, the second part of your discussion, you link it back into that same past research. Do not introduce new research in your discussion. Talk about the research you discussed in your introduction. Okay? And you say whether or not you found the same results. Then you should have some sort of statement as to why. Why do you think that you got those results? Okay, and your hypothesis could have been supported or rejected. You say why. Why do you think that was the case? Okay, the next two parts. Sometimes students have difficulties with this. You need to talk about your EVs. So mention some EVs and explain how they could be overcome or limited in the next time this experiment was to be conducted. Now, it's probably best if you don't just list 1 million EVs, because then why would you have done the experiment if there's so many EVs? So maybe list 3 or 4 extraneous variables and 1 or 2 limitations. I think if you're listing more than that, your experiment would appear to be pretty invalid. So your EVs, make sure that you use the correct term. Now, we've already gone through this in class, so you want to be talking about an extraneous variable or participant variable of mood may have influenced the results. Okay, so make sure you talk about the proper names, participant variable or Hawthorne effect and so on. Okay, and then how they could be overcome or eliminated or minimised. Okay, it's really important to mention that as well. And then the next part of your discussion is to list any limitations. Limitations are about the actual design of your experiment. Okay? So it's slightly different to EVs, however they could affect each other. And again, explain how they could be overcome. Okay, I've got another heading here for conclusion. Now sometimes you'll see conclusion written independently or separately from the discussion. I don't like to do that. So, but it is sort of its own little section in your discussion. So that's the only reason why I've done it on a separate page. Now, basically, this is the section of the very last section of your report that says whether or not your results can be generalised to the population at hand. So remember, you didn't test the population. You did a test of the sample. So we want to discuss here, can this test of your sample be generalised to the population? So, some factors that don't allow us to generalise things is if our sample is too small. So if we're doing 2,000 students, university students, and we test 5 of them, okay, that sample is too small. Now basically this goes into the second point, and the second point is that the sample doesn't reflect the characteristics of the population. Okay, how can 5 people represent the characteristics of 2,000? Okay, so those two are very strongly related. The next point is about EVs. If there's a whole heap of EVs, if there's too many EVs, then we know that our DV has been confounded, our results have been confounded. Okay, and the last point is there with limitations. Limitations, there's too many limitations, too many flaws of the design of your experiment, then you can't really generalise that to your population. For Year 12s, you'll also be looking at p-value, okay, and we'll have another separate presentation on p-value because it is quite a big and sometimes confusing concept for some people. Okay. The last thing now, in Year 12 psych, you don't really need to worry about this, but I think it's important just to know about it. I mentioned it earlier as well. Your last section is the very back, it's the appendix. Now your appendix is where you include any additional information about your procedure or about your results. So you might, if you wanted to, you might actually include your raw data in the appendix section. Okay? It definitely doesn't go in your results section. I forgot to say that in the last slide. You might also include things like your surveys or things like that. So basically any additional information that's going to help somebody else replicate your study or understand your study would go in the appendix. So hopefully now you understand how to write a really great EROP.